Benedict XVI has a beautiful quotation about beauty in the liturgy and music in the liturgy and so on. The liturgy is inherently linked to beauty. It is veritatis splendor. Beauty, then, is not mere decoration, but rather an essential element of the liturgical action, since it is an attribute of God Himself and His revelation. Wow! Beauty it's not even just necessary, it is literally shining forth divinity that we get to perceive in this life. It's really easy for us to view beauty as extra, right? Go long enough in your life without beauty and it deadens your soul. We need beauty in this life, right? And what Pope Benedict is teaching us here is that it's not just icing, and it's not even just an ingredient in the cake, right? It is teaching us something from beyond. It is showing forth divinity, since it is an attribute of God Himself and His revelation. What could be better then for music at Mass, or for anything at Mass, than for it to be as beautiful as possible if beauty is an attribute of God? Okay, I've got a second quotation from St. Pope John Paul II. As a manifestation of the human spirit, music performs a function which is noble, unique, and irreplaceable. When it is truly beautiful and inspired, it speaks to us more than all the other arts of goodness, virtue, peace, of matters holy and divine. Not for nothing has it always been and will it always be an essential part of the liturgy. It's just amazing. This reverence and awe for music, and paintings and sculptures, and all these other things that we have, or a beautiful cassock, or whatever it is that we have at church that's beautiful. Those things speak to us, and they change us, and they're symbolic. They affect us, and nothing affects us as strongly as music. So when you read back through what all these different popes across centuries, these are two recent popes, and popes over centuries and centuries and centuries have created teachings and written about sacred music. There's always this deep awe and reverence about what we're doing at Mass and about the kind of music that we bring. And so it becomes something so much more than me, some music director out in Portland, Oregon, who I've got my favorite thing, or I already know this one, it's easy, so I'm just going to do that one, right? It's not about that at all. It's about bringing the very best. If music speaks to us so incredibly powerfully, we better choose the best music that we possibly can that fits for the worship of God. Okay, and one more quotation for you. From Pope St. Pius X, who, if you look in Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Vatican II document, and you look at those footnotes, boy, he is referenced a lot because he wrote tons and tons on sacred music, and he was probably the chief author that was referenced and whose teachings were drawn on for the Vatican II teachings on sacred music. So here you go. Gregorian chant has always been regarded as the supreme model for sacred music, which is true historically. It's always been considered the model from the early church all the way through until recent times. So that it is fully legitimate to lay down the following rule: the more closely a composition for church approaches in its movement, inspiration, and savor the Gregorian form, the more sacred and liturgical it becomes. And the more out of harmony it is with that supreme model, the less worthy it is of the temple. Wow, that's a very particular thing to say. So church music, he's giving us a standard. The closer to Gregorian chant, the more thumbs up we get. The further away from Gregorian chant, the more thumbs down we get. And that's basically it. This quotation is referenced by the church fathers who put together Sacrosanctum Concilium and Musicum Sacram, which form the basis of our teaching for sacred music today. So what an incredible quotation. And he wrote all sorts of other stuff. If you want to Google Pope St. Pius X music, you'll find a ton of great stuff to look for. All of these quotations from these former popes give us an idea of the church's teaching on sacred music. If you go back 400 years, you're going to find the same kind of teaching and the same kind of controversy. If you go back to the 1100s, the troubadours were trying to get their love songs about Emily fell in love with John to be played at Mass. A big controversy about that, which I thought was hilarious, learning about in music history. All throughout the church and its history, we have controversy about music at Mass. There is no generation that did not experience it. Why? Why would billions of Catholics over century after century after century keep fighting about music? Consider a sacrament. The nature of a sacrament is to make visible the invisible. What is music? Music is a representational art form. It is based off of patterns. So the patterns, for frequency, and it can all be expressed in math, for frequency, for timbre, for instruments, for composition, for scales, for Taylor Swift to Kanye West, whatever it is, it's all patterns, and it can all be expressed mathematically. How do our brains encode? How do we remember information? Through patterns. The way that we make sense of the world is pattern recognition. My toddler figures out, right, that the stove is hot. And he figures out when he touches it the second time, it's still hot. Hey, I've got a pattern here. I'm going to take care of that. From that, up to, middle school, to adulthood, to any stage, our brains, neurologically, that is how we are wired, is we make sense of the world by patterns. Music is the ultimate representational, pattern-based art form, and it is invisible to us. As such, it affects us, right? We feel these emotions when we hear it, and it also changes us. So it rearranges the architecture of the soul. Not for nothing has the church been so concerned with sacred music through all of its history. All of these reasons are why Christians, millions and billions of Christians over the centuries, have fought so intensely about what is sacred music. And we're so thankful at this point that we have this great tradition of music, both the repertoire and the teaching.